Hello everyone.
4 years have passed since the mortal races banded together and stood united against the might of the Burning Legion. Though Azeroth was saved, the tenuous pact between the Horde and the Alliance has all but evaporated.
It's in their capital of Darnassus, where we find Tyrande leading the Night Elves. They've joined the Alliance, a union of human, dwarf, gnome and night elf, pitched against the hordes, orcs, forsaken, Tarn and trolls. Despite their allegiance in Warcraft 3, old hatreds die hard, and the battle over resource in Ashenvale doesn't make relationships any better. In the meantime, she also has to deal with Staghelm, who has quite a different vision for the future of the elves.
Tyrande has no idea how to lead our people.
Unknown to all of them is that Staghelm has been manipulated to join the side of Xavius the Nightmare Lord. When Stormrage told him not to plant a new world tree, namely Teldrassil, Staghelm struck out, placing the leader in a coma, taking control of the Cenarian Circle. While Malfurion has been kept alive by the priestesses of Elune, Staghelm has slowly worked on killing him, and we actually help with that. He has requested heroes to bring him moral grain, and that's what he has used to curse Malfurion. Having the Nightmare corrupt their druids, their world tree itself, it has made things rather difficult, and it's that influence of the Nightmare in which Classic Tyrande mainly played a part. You might recall how the druids in the Wailing Caverns were taken by the Nightmare, or how in the Sunken Temple we battled not only with the trolls, but also corrupted green dragons. That was all due to the influence of the Nightmare, with the final boss being the consort of Ysera herself, namely Eranikus. The trinket you could get there, it lets you torment the poor green spirits, but staying corrupted would not be his fate. When heroes rose up and ventured to the sands of Silithus to deal with the threats of the old god Cthulhu, they had to find a way to open up the gates that were raised after the War of the Shifting Sands, that same war in which Staghelm lost his son, the image of his son being used to manipulate him. It's all connected, I'm telling you. But to do so, to become the Scarab Lord and forge the scepter, they were going to need... Well, there was going to be quite a lot that they were going to need, but amongst the list of things to do, they were going to need 3 shards, blue, red and green. To obtain the last one, they were going to need the aid of Eranikus, which, as you might have figured, was a little bit difficult, seeing how the Nightmare held him under control. Not the only green either. The Dragons of Nightmare were some fantastic world bosses to fight. Now to turn him back to our sides, heroes lured him to the Moonglade, where together with Keeper Remulus and Tyrande herself they battled. After weakening him, she prayed to their goddess Elune to grant them serenity, to watch over their fallen and cleanse the mighty green. He feels the touch of Elune upon his being once more. Eranikus is redeemed and would return to his beloved Ysera's side, while the heroes, they adventure through Ahn'Qiraj and beyond. Now before we move on into the Burning Crusade, there's a little interesting thing that happens, which has to do with time travel. We've gone over the events of the War of the Ancients, that big old event over 10,000 years ago. But at some point in time, the bronze dragon aspect Nostormu, he was investigating the timeways and he got trapped due to the old gods. In a desperate attempt to save the fabric of time and all of reality, he called in the aid of the red dragon Coriastras, who in turn recruited his friend and ally Ronin. Together, they were swept back in time, with one more that came along for the ride. There was the orc Broxigar. He played a critical role in the victory earned that day, and they still make mention of him years later. His special axe, the Axe of Cenarius, would also play a crucial part in the liberation of Malfurion. But what is confusing is that Tyrande, she doesn't change her mindset towards the orcs with that newly added history of Brox, but, you know, it's wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey. The major thing regarding the time travel and their influence on the story of Tyrande is that it formed friendly relationships with the dragons like Alexstrasza and Ysera, with Ronin and Kresis, and while Broxigar sacrificed himself to stop Sargeras from coming through the portal, his weapon, it did make it back to our time, into the hands of his niece Fura. We'll get back to that bit in just a moment. First up, we have our heroes venturing to a whole different planet. Or for some of them, it's venturing back home with the reopening of the Dark Portal during the Burning Crusade. We saw the Blood Elves, through Sylvanas, sign up with the Hordes, while the Draenei, through the Night Elves, they joined Team Alliance. The big story of the Burning Crusade was, of course, dealing with Illidan's Stormrage, and you'd imagine that Tyrande would play quite a part in this.
Tyrande,
But nope, she stayed home while we did our thing. Maiev did finally get what she wanted. Her prey was dead on the floor. Illidan warned her though, that the hunter is nothing without the hunt, and he would, again, be proven right. Worries for later, as Ra of the Lich King is right around the corner. Just before the expansion hit, we saw an attempt made by the Alliance and the Horde to get some kind of peace going. King Varian Rin had been kidnapped by the Black Dragon Onyxia, who would use the magic to split the king into two. There was one weak-willed side that she used as a pawn in Stormwind, easy to manipulate, while the other was planned to be simply killed off. That part didn't exactly work out. Instead, this side of Varian, this Logash, he escaped and was then enslaved by Rhaegar Earthfury. Joined a gladiator team consistent of Valera Sanguinar and Brawl Baremantle. Together, they fought their way to freedom and glory, to which they helped the Lost King with regaining his memories, regain his life. That journey took them through Darnassus, where Tyrande could sense the dark aura that surrounded the king, but seeing how she was no sorcerer herself, she recommended him to visit her ally Jaina Proudmoore, all the way at Faramore. Ultimately, Onyxia was confronted, and Varian was made whole. He was never quite the same though. His warrior spirit would remain the dominant force in his heart, and in the years to come he would struggle to control his rage, that fearsome part of him that had earned him the name Logash. And the negotiations at Faramore, they ended in failure, and then both sides focused on the threat of the Lich King.
My heart sleeps in the Emerald Dream.
For all this time, Malfurion had slumbered, Tyrande's heart lost within the dream. A vision was granted to her. She had received only a handful of such gifts from her mistress over the centuries, and all of them had been messages of great importance. Yet this one was most troubling of all. Despite the best efforts and tremendous vigilance of his tenders, it was shown to her, it was now clear that Malfurion was dying. Something would have to be done, had to be changed to save her beloved. Meanwhile, all across Azeroth, people were falling asleep, trapped in nightmares of their own. Teldrassil had become more and more corrupted, and yet Staghelm, he kept pretending like nothing was wrong. Some might have bought what he was selling, but not Tyrande. Not while Malfurion was in danger. She gathered allies to join her on the quest. Allies like Brawl Baremantle, Eranikus. She entered the dream herself to find her beloved. Malfurion in the meantime has been enjoying the company of Xavius, slowly turning into a tree himself this time, and even worse, Xavius was using him to fuel his own power, to spread the nightmare even further. That didn't mean that there was nothing that Malfurion could do. He's been sending dreams to Fura, that Nisa Broxigar, the wielder of the Axe of Cenarius, convincing her that he was an enemy to track down and take out. Fura eventually managed to make her way into the dream as well, to the very location where Malfurion was a tree. She was about to strike him down, about to set him free. What Malfurion had not planned on was Tyrande showing up as well. With the grace of a loon at her back and her glaive at her side, she had battled her own nightmares along the way. Fears that she carries with her, like the satyr, the ones that had kidnapped her and brought her to the palace. Or Azshara herself, the queen that betrayed them all, as well as the fear of becoming like Azshara.
Such insolence. A lesser monarch might be enraged.
We all carry our demons, and so, seeing this orc about to murder Malfurion, she stepped in between, preventing Fura from doing what had to be done. Malfurion tried to scream and warn Tyrande, but he had no mouth anymore, was forced to watch all of his plans shatter before him. Luckily, Brawl had figured out what Malfurion wanted to happen, distracted Tyrande long enough for Fura to strike, break the spells and bonds that held the Archdruid captive. Gaining his freedom back was not gonna be that easy though. The Night Lord had no intention of letting Malfurion go, and shadowy tendrils wrapped themselves around the Archdruids. To his rescue came the Green Dragonflight, with their leader Ysera herself, rescuing him, but by doing so, opening herself to be captured instead. Just as Xavius had planned, the Green Dragon Aspect's formidable powers were added to the nightmare. With renewed strength, the darkness led by Xavius assaulted them, and the Green Dragons realized that they had to get out of there. Ysera had told them that rescuing Malfurion was everything, that he was more valuable than even she was. The druid could not believe it, kept on struggling to go back, but in doing so, accidentally left the dream and returned to his physical body. He could feel the poison of the Morrow grain in his system. used his skills to collect it and puke it out. He was weak, but the nightmare and the mist that accompanied it was everywhere around him. There was no time for rest.
I'm awake.
With Ysera captured, the powers of the nightmare increased, and with it, the effects upon the world of Azeroth. The mist were spreading further. Xavier's power became stronger and stronger with each victim that he took, each sleeper that was now trapped within the nightmare. The boundaries between the Emerald Nightmare and Azeroth itself became thinner, and something had to be done soon before all be lost to the nightmare forever. First, Malfurion reached Teldrassil, figured out that Staghelm had become corrupted, managed to convince the rest of the Cenarian Circle. They overpowered their corrupted archdruids, to which Malfurion removed and cleansed the corruption upon the tree. Then he convinced those that were still awake, still fighting on Azeroth, that placed their trust within him, allowing him to guide them into the dream when they formed an army against the nightmare. Under Varian's leadership, the different factions of both the Alliance and the Hordes, but also the animals like tigers and raptors, they banded together with those still trying to defend the dream. You had Keepers, Guardians, Ancients of War. All those able were summoned to this war, and their combined might, it drew some of Xavier's attention. Meanwhile, Ysera had done her very best to fight back herself, to prevent Xavius from using her full power. This titanic struggle was taxing on her, but she was eventually liberated by her consort Eranikus. And even though she was too weak to offer any aid further, at least she could no longer be used by the Nightmare Lords. That meant that it all fell upon the shoulders of Malfurion and Tyrande. He first wanted to send her away, to keep her safe, but the High Priestess told him that she would not let him go again, and that they were in this together until the bitter end. With Tyrande at his side, they found the location on Azeroth where Xavier's tree had grown to a gigantic size. Within Azhara, at the edge of what was once Zinajari, the priestess and druid did the near impossible. The powers displayed when this power couple works together are absolutely insane. Alun's touch and radiance, the love of Tyrande and the comfort that it brings, it in turn allows Malfurion to tap into primal powers. He guided the army that was fighting within the dream. He battled against Xavius in the physical world, while simultaneously leading the efforts against his dream form. Tyrande called upon her goddess to lend them her strength and aid. The light of Alun, it had so far managed to keep the nightmares at bay, but it had also been shaped into a weapon which resembled her favorite glaive. Now, to guard Malfurion from their attackers, Alun's aid had come in the form of guardians from Moonlight. Tyrande's touch upon his heart, it gave Malfurion the impetus to push even further beyond what he had expected to be his limits, extending his will into Azeroth and the Emerald Dream simultaneously. Together, they vanquished Xavius and pushed the nightmare all the way back to a place in the dream which is called the Rift of Aln. There he found that he could push it no further, could sense that ancient evil that had actually been empowering Xavius, that touch of the old gods. There was nothing more to gain from trying to push it further, so instead they sealed off the vicinity around the rifts, knowing that the day was saved, but one day they would have to fight this war. Worries for later. For now, let's have ourselves a celebration. A little wedding, in fact, as after 10,000 years, Tyrande and Malfurion decided that it was about time to make it official. For too long, they've been apart. She might have described the relationship in Legion as this beautiful, wonderful thing. Back during this book, she wasn't too sure. His reasons for leaving her side were solid, but with him walking the dream for years at a time, she had sometimes come to wonder if he had ever truly loved her. And of course he had. It was her image on his mind all those countless years. We see Chandris and Brawl that guided the pair down the aisle, while many esteemed guests attended the ceremony, like Ronin, Verisa, Varian, Fura, a whole bunch of people. The ceremony was guided by none other than the dragons, Ysera and Alexstrasza. Tyrande Whisperwind, Malfurion Stormrage. We bless this union, and as our gifts, we also do something else this glorious day. This tree was born without our blessing. It has been cleansed by the druids and blessed by one of us, but a more special blessing shall now be made. Let it now receive through both of us our hopes for a world and a future of which we can all be proud. Malfurion and Tyrande smiled in understanding. Teldrassil received their blessing, becoming stronger and more vibrant. May your life be as full of life as Teldrassil is now. Alexstrasza murmured to the bride and groom as she and Ysera stepped further back. Then Malfurion recalled what still held sway over the Rift of Aln, and he grew troubled. It was not a threat that could be left untouched for long. The Archdruid began pondering what they would have to do, and he felt Tyrande squeeze his hand. She leaned and kissed him. "Enjoy today, Mal. That's all we can ever ask. Today, together." She kissed him again, then added more strongly, "And then we shall begin dealing in earnest with the foulness that guided Xavier's evil." The Archdruid nodded, accepting her wisdom. He would enjoy today and all his time with Tyrande, and knew that he could indeed ask for no more than that. Still, both of them could not also help but have some hope for the future, and Malfurion Stormrage was well aware that great things had been successfully built upon far less than that.
I like you. Say, would you happen to have a twin brother?
Stormrage had returned to his beloved side, but more change was coming to Azeroth with the Cataclysm. Deathwing breaking out of the world, transforming its surface and making great changes to the land. But not just the world was changed, we also saw quite a lot of that happening amongst the factions as well. We had, for example, Thrall appointing Garrosh Hellscream to be the new warchief of the Horde, and our Gary, he set his sights on Ashenvale. He had never been for asking or trading, that was just merchant talk. The Horde was strong and should take whatever it wants.
Now it's my turn!
That's why we also saw the Horde assault Gilneas. This human kingdom, it had sealed itself away from the rest of the world with a big old wall. In the city, the Worgen cursed and spread, while trying to defend their home from this ruthless assault. The Night Elves would turn out to be their salvation, helping them out as they felt somewhat responsible for their plight. You see, the Worgen, they actually originate from Night Elf druids that experimented too far with their pact form. So these Night Elves not only guided the cursed Gilneans through the ritual of balance to have them regain control, they also helped them evacuate when Gilneas ultimately fell. Now, there's just a small matter of rejoining the Alliance.
If I am to accept help, then I am glad it comes from you.
For our Garrosh, Gilneas alone was not enough. He also set his sights on the delicious resources that were waiting in Ashenvale. As if the turmoil of the Cataclysm wasn't enough, now they also had to deal with this threat. This is a story that's told within the novel Wolfheart, which has like two major storylines going on. On the one hand, you got the Night Elves that are dealing with their mortality. They're now aging, they're falling to sickness, and the world around them is changing. So they've decided to let the highborn spellcasters back into their society. Now you gotta understand, that's not an easy or small choice to make, considering that millennia ago, they actually exiled those unable to let go of these practices. But times are changing, and so must their people. Not all were down with that though. Maiev Shadowsong has returned to their people after slaying Illidan, and she now decides to go on quite the murder spree. She took out some of these highborn, almost murdered Malfurion, but these events that are described in the book, they're not exactly retcons, but they did kinda just sweep them under the rug. They placed the blame on her brother Jared for misunderstanding the situation. All that so that they could just have Maiev back on our side as an ally within the Expansion Legion. So yeah, take that story as you will. Now the other major story, that is the Alliance that needs to come together like never before, if it even wants to stand a chance in this hostile changing world. Elune has granted the High Priestess another vision, one which showed her that it would be Varian Rin to bring them all together. Easier said than done though, as Varian was still very much dealing with that angry Logash side of him. During this summit, the meeting organized by the elves, he first flat out rejects Ganon and his people for cowardly abandoning them in the past. Not exactly a great start, but under the subtle guidance of Malfurion, the two kings were sent on a hunt, in which they got to know each other better. They grew a bit of respect. Gen even helped Varian to go through that ritual of balance, to harness and gain control of the rage within. He truly became whole again, which allowed them to work together, guide the Gilnean Worgen against the Horde incursion into Ashenvale, and kick the war chief out of their lands. After which, Varian gladly accepted Gen and his people back in, and all of them together decided to make that vision of Elune come true, to make Varian the High King of the Alliance. To which the Cataclysm played out, Horde and Alliance going at each other, while Deathwing, servant of the old god N'Zoth, caused havoc to the world. For the elves, one of the bigger parts of the story can be found in Mount Hyjal. Their Nordrasil is still healing, but Ragnaros and the Twilight Hammer, they don't care. The flames and devastation spreads until the Resistance is able to summon Cenarius back onto the world, push back the threats all the way into the Firelands itself. Now the Dragon Aspects figured that it was about high time to help the World Tree and the surrounding land heal again, so they prepared themselves for a ritual. One that was interrupted by none other than Fandral Staghelm, liberated by our enemies, turned into a flame druid. They caused quite a bit of trouble, but nothing that we couldn't fix. It was even time for another wedding, Thrall and Agra this time, a wedding that was attended to by Tyrande. And then the Aspects, they finished what they started. They helped heal Nordrasil further. At the end of the expansion, we managed to stop Deathwing and the plans of the old gods. Victory earned at a great price, as it usually goes. This time the Aspects themselves gave up a huge chunk of their power and their immortality. Now, more than ever, they were going to need the aid of mortals to help uphold and protect the domains. It was a brand new age, the Age of Mortals, which Garrosh took great advantage of. He pushed his war efforts to the next level. We saw Faramore bombed, Pandaria invaded, people, resources, and power to claim dominance over the world for his hordes, and all those with the strength to stand at his side. The High Priestess herself, after approving an expedition into the Krezarang wilds, she showed up in Pandaria herself. Now what could this millennia-old warrior and priestess, what could this favorite of Elune, friend to demigod and dragons, survivor of the War of the Ancients, and leader of the Night Elves, what could she offer for the Alliance war efforts against the Hordes?
We have them cornered inside the temple. We should strike now.
Things are rarely what they seem, Tyrande. And my son tells me this is a sacred place.
All the more reason to purify it.
They're defending a fixed position. I'm not gonna play their game. We'll draw them out.
You are wasting precious time.
Be used to make Varian look better, apparently. Well, she wanted to rush in and most likely get a whole bunch of them killed. Varian took the patient approach.
You're being tentative, Varian. You must be decisive if you wish to lead the Alliance.
Patience, Tyrande.
He had us place some traps for the Horde forces within the temple, used himself to lure them out to a swift demise, earn victory with not a single one of our forces lost.
The day is ours, and not a drop of blood was shed on holy ground.
I would have charged right in. Many more lives would have been lost in my rush for victory.
There was a time when I would have done the same. But I've learned a lot over the years. I've fallen for too many of Garrosh's tricks. From now on, we define the terms of this engagement. Tyrande, I may not be a politician, but I am a fighter. I know we can win this war. We need to stand together. You have to trust me. Know that I will do the right thing. If we act as one, we cannot fail.
I see that now. Our strength is yours to command, High King. May this be the first of many victories.
Despite being the one that followed the vision of Elune and pushing towards getting Varian to be the High King. For some reason, they portray her here as not fully trusting Varian. Either way, the war in Pandaria it continued, coming together at the Siege of Orgrimmar. Not everyone amongst the Horde is down with what the War Chief is doing, and a rebellion is formed. The Alliance assists with kicking Garrosh out of the mantle of War Chief. Now, they don't immediately take his life. Instead, they place him on trial to answer for his crimes. Tyrande is appointed to be the accuser, while Bane Bloodhoof speaks for his defense. Ultimately, this trial didn't matter much, as Garrosh, he was set free by the bronze dragon Kairos Dormu, taken over into a whole different reality. That's where he formed his Iron Horde, the Dark Portal turned red, and heroes stepped through to save the day yet again. On this alternate Draenor, they were able to liberate the planet, but the events of Warlords echoed on into the next expansion, back onto our Azeroth. That, however, is a story we're going to save for next week, and then we'll also wrap up the story of Tyrande so far. So for now, thank you very much for watching, everyone. Subscribe if you like my videos, leave a like if you enjoyed this one, and until next time, see ya!